At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. I mean, in the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name is the Voice Ogre, and let's begin.
The mocking laughter was made up of guttural chortles that scraped through the comms. The noise a predator makes when it has cornered something small, soft, and easy. It conveyed a certainty so absolute it had curdled into contempt. On the freighter, the grinder's main view screen, the source of the noise manifested as a face so symmetrical it looked sterile, chiseled from something pale and contemptuous. Pirate Captain Lyrex of the Scaran Corsairs was having a wonderful day. "No weapons." Lyrex's voice slid through the ship's translator, a silken cord of condescension. His arrogance needed no interpretation. He gestured with a long, three-fingered hand toward a data feed that shimmered beside his head. "My scans show only standard power conduits. Your cargo hold contains bulk goods. Your captain's ready room lacks so much as a sharpened letter opener." His crew's clicking amusement crackled over the comms again. "You are an offering, little mammals. We have come to feast." The grinder shuddered, a green-tinged tractor beam tightening its grip, pulling them closer to the angular, blade-like Corsair ship. The human captain, Kagan, a veteran spacer with iron-gray hair and eyes that had logged more hours staring into the black than sleeping, kept her expression neutral.
"This is the freighter, the Grinder,"
she stated, her voice level.
"We are a civilian vessel under the full protection of the Sol Centauri courts. Our certification as an unarmed vessel allows us to dock at neutral ports. You violate the treaty."
Lyrex cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Treaties?" He sighed, as if the word itself was a physical burden. "Treaties are for those who require permission. We require none." Near a console displaying the ship's sensor readings, Harker watched the feed. His manifest listed him as security consultant, a bland title for a vicious line of work. He wore the same simple gray jumpsuit as the engineering crew, his face set in the weary lines of someone who had seen this movie before. His eyes told a different story. They were cold, analytical, and missed nothing. His gaze swept the feed, not missing a flicker, cataloging the data with the detached focus of a man whose survival depended on noticing the one detail everyone else missed. He watched the Scaran captain's smug expression. He watched the scan data flicker, confirming the lack of defenses. He watched Captain Kagan's jaw tighten. He knew predators. The most dangerous ones never felt teeth in their own hide. "Prepare to be boarded," Lyrex announced. His face split into a grin that didn't touch his eyes. "Do try to be cooperative. It makes the process so much more elegant." The transmission cut. The hum of the bridge system seemed to deepen, filling the space left by the pirate's voice. "Well," said the ship's navigator, his face a chalky white. "That's unfortunate." Harker remained silent. He watched the sensor display. The pirates had scanned for weapons. They hadn't scanned the crew. That was a fatal mistake. The hiss of the airlock cycle announced the pirates' arrival. The Scaran boarding party flowed into the ship with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. Their tall, slender bodies were encased in ornate, dark gold armor that looked more ceremonial than functional, etched with swirling patterns that seemed to writhe in the corridor light. They held their plasma rifles at a low ready, a pose that was both relaxed and immediately threatening. They expected screams. They expected pleas, sobs, and the frantic scrabble of terrified prey. The sullen, resentful quiet they received from the 40 or so mixed crew members in the main corridor was a deep disappointment. Humans stood there, their faces a mixture of fear and defiance. Their stillness amused the pirates more than any plea for mercy ever could.
Humans. Look at them.
One of the Skaran hissed to his companion, his voice a low, sibilant whisper.
They just stare like dumb Crocs beasts.
The other chuckled.
Patience, brother. They will learn to make the proper sound soon enough.
One warrior moved past a hydraulic piston near the engine room access and wrinkled his long, narrow nose in disgust at a smear of black lubricant on the deck plating. He stepped around it with an exaggerated motion, as if avoiding a pile of excrement. Another pirate descended a short service ladder from an upper gantry and misjudged the final rung by less than an inch. He stumbled, his poise broken for a single, jarring moment as he caught himself on the railing. His companions let out a few soft clicks of amusement at his clumsiness. Harker saw it all. He stood among the captives, his head slightly bowed, his posture slumped to make him seem smaller. Behind his passive facade, his mind was a high-speed data processor, recording every detail, the stumble, the aversion to filth. He saw it then. Their fluidity wasn't innate, it was drilled. A performance of superiority, and performances could be disrupted. Para, a salvage diver with engine grease ingrained under her fingernails and a temper that could strip paint, stood a few feet from Harker. She looked past weakness. She memorized faces. Her dark eyes narrowed and tracked the specific pirate who shoved old O'Toole, the quartermaster, a little too hard. The pirate laughed as the old man stumbled. A laugh like that seared itself into her memory. Meanwhile, Dr. Cal, the ship's medic and chief biologist, walked with his gaze cast downward, though his eyes darted everywhere. He ignored their weapons. He studied their bodies. He noted the joint structure of their knees, long, thin femurs that connected to a single exposed articulation point just below the armor plating. He saw the bundles of power cabling that ran from the small packs on their backs to the rifles, shielded but still external. He watched the way their slender, three-pointed hands rested on the trigger guards, a grip that relied on pressure from two sides instead of a full wraparound. He was a doctor. He understood anatomy. All anatomy, he knew, had vulnerabilities. The pirates saw a herd of terrified livestock. Harker, Para, and Kel saw a target-rich environment. They saw a room full of weapons awaiting their true purpose. The humans marched through the sterile, metallic corridors of their own ship. The rhythmic tap of Skaran boots on the deck plating a constant, mocking drumbeat. The pirates grew vocal. Their jeers and mockeries ricocheted down the corridors. Their language, a fluid series of clicks and soft hisses, became a stream of casual cruelty through the universal translator.
Smell that? The scent of their fear glands.
One chortled and waved a hand in front of his face.
I think that's just their natural odor.
Another replied, which elicited another ripple of laughter. Para's knuckles were white, her jaw set so tight it ached. Her eyes remained locked on the back of the pirate who'd shoved O'Toole. She catalogued every detail of his armor, his movement, the slight cant of his head. She'd made a promise to herself, a debt that she would collect. Harker, however, appeared utterly passive. His face was a perfect picture of resigned fear, exactly what the Skaran expected. His mind worked, a quiet and furious accounting of his surroundings. He counted the 12 guards and their escort and mapped the battlefield. He passed a row of emergency fire suppression ports in the ceiling. Foam canisters, pressurized, non-toxic, but thick, an excellent obscurant. Range 5 meters from the nozzle. He clocked a manual override panel for the corridor lighting, its casing a standard emergency red. Section 3, Bravo lighting grid. One switch could plunge this corridor into darkness. Their eyes are large, pupils wide. Probably excellent low-light vision, but a sudden shift would flash blind them. His gaze lingered for a split second on a pressure warning schematic next to a sealed maintenance hatch on Deck 9. He mentally cross-referenced it with the ship's main layout he knew by heart. The pirates undoubtedly downloaded the standard public schematics, which showed this hatch led to a small dead-end storage closet. But the valve chart beside it, a detail no schematic would ever include, implied a connection to a secondary life support junction, a back door. He analyzed the deck plating, noted which sections were smooth alloy and which were graded for traction during fluid leaks. The Skarn think they've captured a ship. A cold certainty settled in Harker's gut. He intended to make it their tomb. The ship's brig was small, sterile, and designed for short-term containment of unruly spacers, not as a full-scale prison. 2 main cells with transparent plasteel walls faced a central guard station. The crew was shoved inside. The magnetic shackles they wore activated with a heavy thunk. The cuffs were powerful, designed to deliver a nasty paralytic shock if tampered with, and linked by a short, thick chain. The 3 Skarn guards assigned to watch them were contemptuously casual. They leaned against the guard station walls, their plasma rifles held loosely. They performed this duty 100 times across a dozen species. The outcome remained the same: initial defiance, then despair, then compliance. To amuse himself, one of the guards, the same one Para watched, singled her out. She still glared at him, her hatred of physical force. He found it quaint. He sauntered over to the plasteel wall of her cell, his movements a parody of a predator with its meal. He keyed the door open.
"This one has fire,"
he said to his comrades. His voice oozed amusement.
"I enjoy that. It makes breaking them so much more satisfying."
He stepped inside. Para held her ground. Her chin was up. He approached her and traced a long, elegant finger along her jawline. She recoiled from his touch as if it burned. This only widened his smile. He placed his hand on her throat. He rested it there as a display of absolute, effortless power instead of a squeeze. His thumb pressed gently against her carotid artery.
"So fragile."
The Skarn sneered and flicked his gaze to his friends.
"One could simply crush this, like a ripe fruit."
He missed the shift in her eyes. He failed to understand the sudden, preternatural stillness that came over her body. He was a duelist, a master of ranged combat, a practitioner of an elegant, stylized form of violence. He was about to receive a lesson in something much, much older. The moment froze. The other guards stopped jeering and grew curious. Para made no sound. She refused to struggle. Her entire body coiled, every muscle tensed like a compressed spring. Then she uncoiled. Her entire body moved as one. She didn't throw a punch. She threw her whole body forward, a human battering ram, and drove her forehead into the bridge of the guard's nose. The sound was a wet, sickening, cartilaginous crunch that echoed in the silent brig. The Skarn guard stumbled back, a look of uncomprehending shock on his face. His hand flew to his face too late. Blood, a pale, almost translucent lilac, erupted in a shocking spray. He made a gurgling sound, a wet shriek of agony, and collapsed to his knees. His rifle clattered to the floor. The other 2 guards froze. Their minds, conditioned for ranged firefights and ceremonial duels, could not process the raw, primitive barbarity of the attack. They expected tears. Their training had not prepared them for a human skull being used as a goddamn hammer. That hesitation was an eternity. In the chaos of those few stolen seconds, Harker moved. Thought vanished. Action took over, fueled by the muscle memory of 100 brutal encounters. He spun and slammed his shackled wrists with all of his strength against the reinforced corner of the cell wall, where the plasteel met the bulkhead. A jolt of pain shot up to his shoulders. With a guttural roar of effort, he twisted his hands inward and forced his thumbs against the unforgiving steel. A faint, sickening pop announced both thumbs dislocated. The unnatural angle allowed his hands, slick with sweat and blood, to slip free from the magnetic cuffs. The moment the biometric contact broke, the cuffs deactivated their shock feature, but the heavy steel chain still connected them. He snatched the fallen guard's shock maul from his belt, a heavy, brutal-looking implement for crowd control. He wasted no time. He used the cell wall as a brace and wedged a link of the shackle chain into a narrow seam in the wall paneling. He raised the maul. Crack! He smashed the energized head of the maul down onto the chain link. The metal groaned and warped. Crack! Again, another shower of sparks. The wall screamed. Snap! The link broke. He was free. The entire sequence consumed a desperate, frantic handful of seconds. The sight of Harker, a bloody and vengeful specter who broke his chains, was a signal. The crew surged forward in a wave of desperation and fury. Style and technique vanished. They fought with mass and momentum, a single raging organism. They tackled the two remaining stunned guards, clawed at their faces, and used the weight of their bodies to drag the taller, more slender aliens down. The sounds were grunts of exertion, high-pitched shrieks of scar and pain, and the dull, meaty, repetitive thud of human fists on ornate armor. The pirates were strong, but unprepared for this. Their doctrines lacked a chapter on dog piles. They had no counter for an enemy intent on gouging their eyes out with a thumbnail. It was messy. It was brutal. It was beautifully, terrifyingly human. Scaran reinforcements, alerted by the sudden silence from the brig's comm channel, followed by a cacophony of guttural noise, finally arrived. A 4-member fire team slid to a halt at the doorway. They raised their plasma rifles, expecting to find their comrades putting down a minor scuffle. The brig was a wreck. 2 Scaran guards were down, unmoving, their elegant armor dented and smeared with lilac blood. The third knelt, clutching his ruined face and moaning. The humans stood amidst them. They were bruised and bleeding, their gray jumpsuits torn. Their faces were the faces of predators, not frightened prey. Their eyes burned with an intensity the pirates had never seen in any species. Harker stood at the forefront. He held the captured shock maul in a ready, 2-handed grip. Its power cell hummed ominously. Beside him, Para clutched a piece of her broken shackle. Its jagged, snapped edge dripped with pale Scaran blood. She held it like a knife, her knuckles white. Behind them, the rest of the crew, men and women who worked with wrenches and datapads, were armed with grim purpose and the fury of the cornered. A Scaran officer at the door shouted a command about dropping their weapons and surrendering. Too late. The humans had tasted blood. Their days of surrender were over. With a single unified sound, a deep, primal roar of raw aggression, they charged. They poured out of the brig, a wave of vengeful, unarmed apes, directly into the guns of their technologically superior enemy. The humans scattered. The Scaran, disciplined and trained for open-field combat, fired a volley of plasma bolts that superheated the air where the main group had been. The humans were gone. They melted into the ship's maintenance corridors, the labyrinthian network of service tubes and junctions that was their home turf. Harker quickly gathered his core group: Para, Kel, a tough old engineer named Sal, and a young, wiry technician named Jenny, in a cramped service junction that hummed with the ship's environmental controls. Adrenaline was a wild, intoxicating drug in the air, but Harker's voice was a low, calming force of gravity. "Listen up," he commanded, his voice sharp and clipped. "They'll expect us to run for the life pods or retake the engine room. Standard insurgent playbook. We will do neither." He stabbed a finger at a schematic on the junction wall. "We're going to Deck 9, access Corridor 3 Gamma. It's a dead end in the schematics they downloaded, but I saw a pressure valve schematic next to the hatch. It connects to the secondary life support junction for this whole sector." He looked around at the faces that stared back at him. A mix of fear and raw fury. "Civilian freighter regulations," he continued. A grim smile touched his lips for the first time. "Every deck has manual overrides for atmospheric controls and artificial gravity plating in case of emergencies. The pirates saw a ship with a lot of safety features. They have no idea the building code is about to kill them." Para held up her makeshift shiv.
"So what's the plan, Sergeant? We hit them with safety violations?"
"Something like that," Harker said. His eyes glinted in the dim light. "This isn't about escape. This is pest control. We're taking back our ship, piece by bloody piece."
"The medical bay?"
Cal said, his voice unnervingly calm.
"They'll have posted no guards. It's a non-strategic asset."
"You sure?" Sal, the engineer, asked, and wiped sweat from his brow with the back of a greasy hand.
"Positive,"
Cal replied.
"To them, it's a room of benign tools for tissue repair. They lack the imagination to see them as anything else."
He was right. The med bay was empty, the door unlocked. The pirates had passed through, perhaps rifled through a few drawers for narcotics, but otherwise left it untouched. A fatal error. Cal moved with a quiet purpose that was more unnerving than Para's open rage. He bypassed the electronic lock on a cabinet of surgical tools and orthopedic supports with a few quick taps on a control panel. Jenny watched, wide-eyed, as the doctor pulled out a long, thin titanium strut from a bone-grafting frame.
"What are you doing, Doc?"
she asked. Her voice trembled slightly. Cal placed the strut over the edge of a heavy biobed and, with a single sharp movement, snapped it in half. The ends were jagged and lethally sharp.
"I'm repurposing a tool for osteogenesis,"
he said, his voice as flat and clinical as if he were diagnosing space flu.
"into a tool for osteodestruction. The application is merely a matter of trajectory and force."
He handed one of the gleaming, improvised spears to Para. She took it, tested its weight, and gave a grim nod of approval. It felt much better in her hand than had the broken shackle. She handed the other to Harker. Then he moved to the chemical locker. His hands moved across vials and containers. He mixed a viscous, clear, sterilizing agent with a dark blue diagnostic fluid in a beaker. The mixture bubbled faintly. He loaded the resulting compound into a series of large, durable hypospray injectors, the kind for mass inoculations.
"A potent chloric-based corrosive," he explained. "Highly effective on chitinous and protein-based materials. Their armor is a composite alloy, but the steels around the joints and the optical lenses on their helmets are weak. Aim for the face. They can't fight what they can't see."
Finally, he picked up a portable laser bone saw. He thumbed the activation switch. The tool, designed for clean, bloodless incisions through calcium, hummed to life with a high-frequency whine, a promise of gruesome potential.
"This,"
Cal said and held it up,
"is for closer work."
He left the medbay a few minutes later. No longer just angry crew members, but a guerrilla unit armed with the instruments for surgical butchery. Harker's plan unfolded with terrifying speed. He led Saul and Jenny to the Deck 9 junction he identified earlier. A small, forgotten panel was hidden behind a maintenance locker filled with spare filters, just as he predicted. On a shared datapad, they saw life sign indicators of a 4-member Scaran patrol move down the main corridor directly below their position. They moved as a perfect diamond arrangement. It was tactically sound, by the book, and utterly predictable.
"The safeties are hardwired, Harker,"
Sal hissed, his knuckles wide around a crowbar.
"We can't just crank it up. The panel's locked out."
We're not going through the controls,
Harker said. He pointed with a captured shock maul at a thick power conduit junction box on the wall.
We'll bypass the regulators and dump main power directly into the Deck 9 emitters. Jenny, get ready to kill the feed the second I say. Sal, give me that crowbar.
Sal pried the heavy cover off the junction box with a groan of protesting metal. Inside was a spaghetti mess of shielded cables. Harker knew this ship's guts better than his own. He pointed.
That's the primary feed. We need to sever it and reroute the emergency battery line directly into the emitter grid.
That'll overload every capacitor in the system,
Jenny whispered. Her fingers moved across the data pad to isolate the circuits.
That's the point,
Harker said grimly.
Now, Sal!
With a grunt, the old engineer slammed the crowbar across the terminals. A blinding flash of sparks and a loud crackle erupted. For a second, the lights in the maintenance shaft flickered. In the corridor below, the world changed. The gravity spiked. It went from a comfortable 1G to a crushing 3Gs in a microsecond. For the Skaran, it was catastrophic. Their tall, slender physiology, evolved for elegance and grace on a world with slightly lower gravity than Earth's, was built for agility, not durability. This was the equivalent of a full-speed vehicle collision happening to every cell in their bodies simultaneously. The sound that echoed up through the maintenance shaft was sickeningly loud. It was a rapid sequence of wet snaps and cracks, like a bundle of dry twigs under a boot. Their lighter, hollower bones, a marvel of evolutionary efficiency, shattered under the instantaneous, crushing load. Knees, ankles, spines, they all gave way at once. The four Skaran collapsed into heaps of broken limbs and crumpled armor. Their deaths were brutal, immediate, and silent save for the loud sound of their own bodies breaking apart. On the datapad, Harker watched their 4 green life signs turn blood red and then vanish.
Kill it, Jenny!
Jenny slapped a control on her pad, and the gravity field returned to normal. The sharp smell of superheated ceramic and burnt wiring filled the small space.
Huh.
Sal grunted and looked at the smoking junction box.
Never thought I'd do that.
I get used to it, Harker said grimly. Every part of the ship is a weapon now. Para, empowered by her new titanium spear, led a second team to a cargo bay filled with prefab colony housing plates. The plates themselves were too heavy to lift, but the meter-long steel support struts that held them in place were another story. With a crowbar from an emergency toolkit, they pried loose half a dozen of the bars. They were heavy, crude, and perfectly balanced for bludgeoning. They set their trap in a T-junction where the lighting was temperamental and flickered intermittently. The humans melted into the shadows, hidden in alcoves, maintenance hatches, and behind stacks of cargo containers. They waited, their breathing steady, their new weapons held tight. When the next 4-member Skaran patrol entered the junction, they moved cautiously with rifles up and saw nothing. The flickering lights played tricks on their wide, sensitive eyes. They scanned for threats at a distance and looked for something to shoot. They never thought to examine the shadows beside them. The humans emerged with focused grunts of exertion instead of war cries. The sound was the dull, sickening thump of heavy steel on armor and bone, not the clean snap hiss of plasma fire. The first Skaran went down before he could register the attack. His helmet caved in by a blow from a burly crewman named Gregor. The second turned and brought his rifle around, but Para was already on him. She lunged low and drove her sharpened titanium rod into the softer material at the knee joint instead of bashing through his armor. Skaran shrieked and went down. His leg buckled. Para was on him in an instant and finished the job with a brutal purpose that a predator would admire. The Skaran were built for ranged combat. In the crush of close quarters, against an enemy who welcomed the intimacy of violence, they were clumsy and slow. Their long rifles were a liability too,
unwieldy to bring to bear. The humans, a whirlwind of brutal, efficient violence, dismantled the fire team in less than 10 seconds. The coppery, metallic scent of Scaran blood and the sharp scent of superheated ceramic from a single wild plasma shot that seared a black scar into the ceiling filled the air. Tan stood on the captured bridge of the grinder, his posture rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. As Lyrex's second in command, his duty was to oversee the tactical execution of the boarding. On the main display, a schematic of the ship showed the life signs of his fire teams. Dozens of steady green icons in disciplined patterns. The operation proceeded exactly according to Corsair doctrine. Then, Fire Team Gamma, assigned to sweep Deck 9, moved into a long, straight corridor. With shocking speed, their 4 icons flashed from green to blood red and then vanished. Tan stared. A cold knot of professional unease tightened in his gut. There was no firefight, no distress call on the comms. They had simply ceased to exist. An equipment malfunction, perhaps? A moment later, in the cargo sector, Fire Team Delta 4's icons converged on a single point. Then, they too were extinguished in a sudden, violent flicker of red. Again, quiet. He opened a comm channel to his captain, who observed the flawless operation from the comfort of his own command ship, the Gilded Talon.
Captain Lyrex,
Tan said, his voice clipped and formal.
We lost contact with 2 fire teams. 8 soldiers. The enemy. They behave in an unanticipated manner.
Lyrex's voice came back, dripping with annoyance. Unanticipated? Tan, they are livestock. What is there to anticipate? They hide.
Sir, the nature of the signal loss is anomalous. We detected no weapons fire, no comms chatter. They are eliminated silently and completely. I advise a change in tactics, a systematic sweep and clear full armor, lockdown thermal imaging.
Lyrex cut him off with a sharp laugh.
Tan, you are a soldier. You think like one. This is pest control. It is not a military engagement.
They are unarmed natives in the dark. Your tactics are unnecessary and frankly insulting. Flush them out. Stop wasting my time with your cowardice. The channel clicked shut. Tan stared at the tactical map. He was a soldier. His soldier's instincts screamed at him that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. He watched a map where more of his soldiers' lives were about to be methodically erased. Harker's team, after they confirmed the success of their gravity trap, moved to their next target, the life support hub connected to the Deck 9 junction. It was a claustrophobic room filled with humming machinery and a complex control panel that governed the atmospheric scrubbers for the entire forward section of the ship. Scouting reports from other crew members in the vents confirmed that a large number of Scaran, at least 10 of them, gathered in the mess hall to regroup and await orders. They lounged at the tables, confident in the security of the sealed room. Venting the atmosphere is too loud, Harker said as he worked the controls. Suit alarms would trigger instantly. Cal tapped the diagnostic screen on the panel.
Their suits have an independent air and will auto-seal the moment that they detect a non-viable atmosphere. We can't suffocate them. Unless their sensors are scrambled.
Jenny put in, her eyes alight with feverish intensity. She pointed at the schematic.
The power conduits behind that wall feed the guidance emitters for the cargo bay loaders. They generate a localized magnetic field. If I created a feedback surge, well, I can't sustain it, but for 30, maybe 40 seconds, I could generate an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to fry their suit comms and environmental sensors.
Harker nodded. A plan formed instantly. Cal, you're on the scrubbers. Reverse the CO2 flow the second Jenny gives a signal. We'll flood the room with unbreathable air while their suits are blind. They synchronized their data pads. Harker gave the nod. Hit it, Jenny. Jenny slammed her hand down on a bypass switch she'd jury-rigged. In the mess hall, the lights flickered violently for a second. The Scaran looked up, annoyed. A low hum vibrated through the deck plating. On their suit displays, a dozen error messages flashed in unreadable code before the screens went to static. Their comms hissed with white noise. "Now, Doctor!" Harker commanded. Cal slammed a lever and reversed the atmospheric recyclers. The system pumped carbon dioxide back into the sealed mess hall instead of scrubbing it. The effect was slow, subtle, and insidious. The Scaran first felt a slight headache, a creeping lethargy they dismissed as fatigue. Then their movements became sluggish, their thoughts clouded and confused. One of them yawned, a strange, jaw-popping gesture. Then another. Panic began to set as they gasped for air that had no substance. Their lungs burned, their vision tunneled to black. Their suits, sensors fried, gave no warning. They drowned in the air. One by one, they slumped to the ground, unconscious. 5 minutes later, the humans entered the mess hall. They wore emergency rebreathers taken from a wall locker. They moved through the room filled with the still forms of the pirates and efficiently, quietly, eliminated the incapacitated invaders with their makeshift weapons. No noise, no fuss, just another fire team wiped off Tan's map. Para was separated from her group during a hasty retreat from a Scaran patrol that nearly stumbled upon them. She found herself in a narrow service tube, the metal cool against her palms. Then she heard it, the soft, rhythmic tap of Scaran boots in the tube behind her. She was hunted. She rounded a corner and saw a dead end 10 meters ahead. She was trapped. A single Scaran warrior appeared at the corner she had just passed. Its slender form nearly filled the tube. It saw her, and the alien equivalent of a triumphant grin spread across its face. It was confident. It cornered what it believed was a single, terrified human. It raised its plasma rifle. The charge, whine, echoed in the confined space. Para advanced. She cowered for no one. She did the last thing the Scaran expected. She charged. She screamed a raw, wordless cry of defiance and launched herself down the narrow tube. The Scaran, startled by the suicidal aggression, fired. She was too close, her movements too erratic. The plasma bolt seared the wall an inch from her head and filled the tube with the acrid smell of superheated ceramic and vaporized metal. She slammed into the Scaran with the force of a battering ram. Her momentum carried them both to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The alien was surprisingly strong, its wiry limbs like steel cables. It tried to bring a wicked-looking combat knife from its belt to bear. Para, unable to get leverage with the titanium rod in the tight confines, did the one thing that Scaran's combat doctrine, its culture, its entire evolutionary history could never have conceived. She opened her mouth and sank her teeth into the soft flesh of its exposed forearm. The alien shrieked, a high-pitched, piercing sound of agony and horrified shock, not a warrior's cry of pain. It dropped the knife as if it were white-hot, and stared at the bleeding, crescent-shaped bite mark on its arm, in utter, abject horror. Its mind reeled from the disgusting barbarity of the act. As it stared, Para grabbed the fallen knife. The Scaran looked up from its wound just in time to see her grin. A feral, blood-smeared smile. The most terrifying thing it had ever witnessed. It was also the last thing that it ever saw. The Scaran were broken. Their elegant raid devolved into a meat grinder. The scattered, terrified survivors, less than a dozen of the original 50, were driven back into the bridge, their last defensible position. They sealed the heavy blast doors and turned their gaze into their prison. On the command deck of the Gilded Talon, Lyrex paced like a caged animal. His usual languid grace was gone, replaced by a twitchy, raw, seething fury. Reports from Tan had gone from confused to concerned to outright panicked before the bridge went silent. Fire teams vanished. His soldiers were butchered in the dark by unarmed natives. An insulting, infuriating outcome. He stormed to his comm station and activated the ship-wide broadcast on the grinder, overriding the local system. His voice, a venomous snarl instead of a silken purr, boomed through every corridor in every compartment of the freighter.
You are vermin!
He roared, his voice laced with hysterical contempt.
Filthy, scurrying things with fingernails and teeth! You hide in the darkness like scavengers. That is what you are! Is this how you fight? In the shadows? With your grubby little tricks? Have you no honor? No shred of dignity? Come and face your masters in the light! Come and die with some semblance of courage!
A challenge born of desperation. The howl of a creature whose entire worldview, a carefully constructed palace of technological, cultural, and genetic superiority, crumbled to dust around him. He could not comprehend an enemy who refused to fight on his terms, so he tried to taunt them into it. In a nearby corridor, Harker, Para, and the remaining core of the resistance group heard the broadcast over a captured comm unit. Para spat on the floor.
Honor? He can shove his honor up his...
Harker held up a hand. A grim, tight smile played on his lips.
He's invited us in,
he said softly.
It would be rude to decline.
Kel, ever the pragmatist, already scanned a schematic of the area on a salvaged datapad.
The bridge blast door is rated to withstand external plasma bombardment and explosive decompression. Direct assault is, inadvisable.
We will assault it,
Harker said. His eyes gleamed with a dangerous light.
We're gonna knock.
He looked at Sal. Sal, the galley. What have we got for compressed gas? The engineer's eyes lit up with understanding.
Main galley is 3 large canisters of cooking gas. We also took a dozen oxygen and nitrogen tanks from the medbay emergency stations.
Perfect, Harker said. Let's build a battering ram. They moved to the galley. The crew worked with a silent, focused intensity, a well-oiled machine of improvisation. They found a heavy, wheeled food trolley with a frame of reinforced alloy. They piled it high with every compressed gas tank they could find, lashed them together with stripped power conduits, and faced all the nozzles forward. Kel directed the placeman.
Cluster them tightly. We want the ruptures to be simultaneous. It's about a focused concussion wave, not a projectile.
Jenny, the technician, worked on the detonator. She carefully stripped the power pack from a fallen pirate's plasma rifle and jury-rigged it to a simple digital timer from the galley oven. Ugly, improvised, utterly, devastatingly lethal. They wheeled their creation down the main corridor toward the bridge blast door. The heavy quiet broke only for the faint protest of the trolley's wheels. The remaining Scaran huddled behind that door and thought that they were safe. They were about to receive a very percussive delivery. The humans wedged the trolley firmly against the door's central seam, the point of maximum structural vulnerability. They retreated to a safe distance around a corner and unspooled a thin wire connected to Jenny's makeshift detonator. The entire crew huddled together and braced for the blast. Harker looked at Para and gave a single, sharp nod. She took a deep breath. Her finger hovered over a trigger button.
Knock, knock,
she whispered and pressed it. The explosion was a deafening, grinding roar. The trolley vaporized instantly. The simultaneous eruption of a dozen rupturing tanks created a catastrophic overpressure event. A focused hammer blow of force instead of a shrapnel. The blast door, designed for external pressure, bowed inward like a sheet of tinfoil. It turned a concave cherry red from the heat and force. With a scream of tortured metal, it ripped from its magnetic moorings and blasted into the bridge. The space filled with a concussive shockwave and a storm of shrapnel from the vaporized trolley. Before the dust and smoke could settle, the humans poured through the jagged, smoking breach. The scene on the bridge was chaos. The Scaran were disoriented, deafened, their battle lines broken before the fight began. The blast door turned projectile had crushed 2 of them instantly. The humans were on them in seconds. The final brawl, a brutal close-quarters melee, was fought over consoles that sparked with electricity and amidst the bodies of the fallen. The Scarran's plasma rifles were useless at this range, too long and unwieldy. The humans fought with their improvised arsenal, pipes, sharpened rods, the laser bone saw, and their bare, hardened hands. Their every blow was fueled by a month of adrenaline and a desperate, unyielding will to live. They moved with the coordinated ferocity they had just discovered. Sal and Gregor formed a wall, their steel pipes a whirlwind of crushing blows. Kel used his acid hyposprays with devastating effect and blinded a Scarran who tried to rally the others. Para was a dervish of destruction, her titanium rod and captured knife a blur. She fought with a joyful, terrifying fury. They were a pack of predators who worked together, created openings, and overwhelmed their technologically superior foes with primal violence. Harker ignored the chaos. He had one target. He carved a path directly toward the command chair where Tan tried to organize a defense. The Scarran's second in command was a soldier, and he fought like one. He drew a sidearm. Harker ducked under a wild shot and slammed his steel pipe into Tan's wrist and shattered it. The gun clattered away. A figure in ornate dark gold armor stepped between them. Captain Lyrex. His face lit up with incandescent rage. His elegance was gone, replaced by the raw fury of a humiliated god. He drew an ornate ceremonial energy blade from his hip. Its edge hummed with contained power. He fell into a classic duelist stance. The perfect, beautiful form from a Scarran combat manual. He saw this as a final, formal execution, not a brawl. Harker came at him with a dented steel pipe. Lyrex lunged, his speed blinding. The energy blade arced in a flawless silver-blue line, aimed for Harker's neck, a killing blow. Harker advanced. He parried nothing. He dodged nothing. He took a half-step in. He accepted the slice of the energy blade across his non-dominant forearm. The pain was a blinding, white-hot agony, a sensation of his arm dipped in lava. The smell of his own cooked flesh filled his nostrils. The adrenaline surge was so powerful, it felt like ice water in his veins and numbed the agony for the precious critical second. He roared through it, a sound of animalistic defiance. He used the moment of contact, the moment Lyrex was overextended and committed to his perfect strike, to swing his pipe in a brutal, low, ugly arc. It connected with Lyrex's knee. A wet, grinding crunch. Lyrex collapsed, his leg folded at a sickening angle. His perfect duelist stance was ruined, his body contorted into a broken, graceless heap. The energy blade deactivated and clattered to the floor. Harker kicked the blade away and pinned the shrieking captain to the deck. The steel pipe pressed hard across his throat. Lyrex twisted his head, his eyes wide, and stared down at his own mangled knee, at the ugly, unartistic brutality of the injury. The sight of his own ruined perfection, the absolute, messy reality of the violence inflicted upon him, did something to his mind. His screams of pain dissolved into something far worse, a high, hysterical, bubbling laugh. Tears streamed from his wide, unblinking eyes as he stared at his broken leg, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. The reality of the humans, of what they were and what they could do, shattered him more completely than any weapon could. While Harker secured the gibbering, laughing wreck of Captain Lyrex, Para shoved her way to the comm station. A terrified Scarran officer frantically tried to send a distress call to the fleet. Para wasted no time. She grabbed him by the back of the head and slammed his face into the console once. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. She scanned the controls, then looked back. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw Captain Kagan, her face grim. She held a captured plasma rifle like a club and stood over a downed pirate. Their eyes met. Para gave a sharp nod toward the comms panel. Captain Kagan moved with purpose. She stepped over bodies and debris. She took the station. Her presence immediately commanded the space. She looked at the terrified, surrendered pirate officer that Para hauled to his feet.
"Open a fleet-wide channel,"
Kagan ordered. Her voice was quiet, but carried the cold weight of absolute authority.
"Now."
The pirate's slender fingers trembled uncontrollably as he complied. The channel opened with a soft chime. Kagan leaned into the microphone. Her calm, clear voice rang out across the emptiness to the other pirate ships. The victor's icy, deliberate statement, not the raw, furious scream of a survivor.
"This is Captain Kagan of the freighter the Grinder. Your boarding party is neutralized. Your captain is my prisoner."
She paused. The quiet hung, and the implication sank in a dozen other bridges.
"You scanned this ship for weapons?"
She continued. Her voice dropped to a deadly conversational tone.
"An understandable mistake. You looked for technology. You should have looked for us."
Another pause.
"We are human. Consider this your only warning. Disengage and withdraw, or we will come for you next."
On the bridge's main view screen, the effect of her message was immediate and profound. The Skaran Corsair ships, the Gilded Talon and its 2 escorts, held a predatory orbit. Now, their disciplined arrangement wavered. They were a fleet of wolves who just received a calm, polite, and utterly final warning from the flock of sheep they just watched disembowel their alpha. Their morale, already eroded by the silent, brutal, inexplicable losses on their ship displays, collapsed completely. This was a butchery, not a battle. A suicide mission against an enemy that could not comprehend. Not a profitable raid. Profit was forgotten. Elegance was forgotten. Survival remained. One by one, their engine signatures flared, hot and desperate. They turned in a panicked, chaotic scramble, each ship for itself. They fled into the blackness of space. They abandoned their captain, their comrades, and the wreckage of their pride. The few remaining conscious pirates on the Grinder Bridge heard the broadcast. They saw their ships abandon them on the view screen. The last vestiges of their fight drained away, replaced by a stark, primal terror. They dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, their hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender. The fight was over. The quiet that fell on the bridge of the Grinder was heavier than any gravity. A disaster zone of smoking consoles, scorch marks, and the mingled blood of 2 species. But finally, blessedly, quiet. The ferocious incandescent adrenaline began to fade from the humans, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that made their limbs feel like lead. They stood amidst the carnage, the living and the dead, and looked at each other. They were covered in their own blood and the pale, strange blood of the Skaran. They saw the makeshift, gore-stained weapons in their hands, pipes, shivs, tools of their trade transformed into instruments of death. There was no celebration, no cheering, only a grim, shared acknowledgement of the horrific, primal thing that they had to become in order to survive. Harker leaned against a console. The pain in his burned and lacerated arm finally hit him in a white-hot, nauseating wave. He looked at his crew, his people. He looked at his captain, who stood tall at her comm station. They were alive, all that mattered. Para slumped into the navigator's chair. The fury finally drained out of her and left her hollow and shaky. She had done things she never thought that she could do, and she was unsure if she should be proud or horrified. Dr. Kell, ever the professional, already moved among them. His calm, steady voice was a small anchor in the sea of chaos and bloodshed as he began to work patching them up.
Press your bandage here, he would murmur. This needs a sterilizing agent. You sit back down before you fall. In the weeks and months that followed, as the grinder limped to the nearest port for repairs and testimony, a new story began to circulate through the fringe systems. It was whispered in the shadowy cantinas of outlaw stations and the bustling spaceports of the Orion Arm. The story of the unarmed human freighter, the one the Scaran corsairs laughed at. The story of the lambs who grew teeth, who slaughtered the elegant, feared pirates with scrap metal, repurposed tools, and their bare hands. The galaxy, which had long dismissed humanity as industrious, unremarkable newcomers, received a very important and very bloody lesson. You can scan a human ship for all the weapons you want. You will miss the point. On a human ship, everything is a weapon. Everyone is a weapon. And you never, ever mess with humanity.